The beginning point really was to find a mode of transport where we could show a whole bunch of people sort of interacting. I came up with the idea of using the technique of from the film Time Code, directed by Mike Figgis.
They really understood how the process of making time code was a kind of unique process. So, you know, which was great to work with people who understood what you were doing and weren't unrealistic in their expectation. And the structure is literally, let's use the 4 cameras to split up a double-decker bus, 2 up and 2 down.
Once you start shooting, you can't stop the camera. There's no editing. It's a real-time film. Now, that's hard enough to do on 1 camera. On 4 cameras, it's really, really tricky. 4 cameras on a bus that's moving, that's even trickier.
It was obvious that he really was the only guy to be able to do this. I mean, in fact, he's kind of designed his own rigs to help him make the stuff.
I basically came up with, you know, I'm sure you have footage of it, of the steering wheel. The basic idea is that further apart you have the hands, you know, the more stable the actual horizontal plane will be.
When you put the 4 cameras back together into what I call a quadrant with 4 screens, it more or less represents the correct geography of the bus.
It's kind of like musical parts. It's kind of like 4 main instruments, if you like, and they're like the 4 cameras, the 4 quadrants, and there's action between each one. And it's very important that when the action from one quadrant leaves and a character gets up and moves through, they will go through the other quadrant.
The casting process for this 3-minute film was fairly involved. I didn't want just to go to a sort of, you know, like a junior acting academy and get the sort of best, quote, actors.
We have 3 minutes, no more, no less. Exactly 3 minutes to tell this story.
Within that bus, there are going to be, you know, a number of stories going on. So if people get on the bus,
You get a lady getting on and she's like really, really pushing. You get the hoodie guy, the guy on his mobile phone, the guy with his chips.
Okay, well, let's talk about it now.
We liked the idea that this guy was completely in his own sort of bubble.
the bus itself was noisy, so he was having to raise his voice. But he was acting in an arrogant way by assuming that it was his right to have silence on the bus.
There's a pregnant lady on the bus, and the guy on his mobile phone, he's so engrossed in his mobile phone conversation that although she's right in front of him, he's completely ignoring her.
I go for this seat, which he takes no interest in me, doesn't even see me, and takes the seat instead. So I'm dangling from one of the holders up at the top of the roof.
He's so obnoxious that we're kind of, who is that?
The person getting on eating food is hungry. He's not an antisocial character. He's just bought some food, he has to eat it.
The nugget, the look, just like real Buster Keaton stuff, you know, it's like Charlie Chaplin acting.
It's all madness, but I'm here just eating my food, you know, so I'm just happy I got my food and just happy I'm on the bus that I'm going home now, so.
Then one could argue then you should eat it in a slightly more kind of respectful way to the other passengers, and he throws his litter down at the end and someone challenges him, and he realizes that he was antisocial in the way he did it.
When we do this props, do we actually have real food?
I can't get real food, it's hard.
Well, they need to be eaten.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and this could be a challenge. Now the thing to remember is everybody's on camera all the time. So even when you're doing, let's say, technically nothing, you are doing something.
A young guy in a hoodie who is, let's say, the stereotype of a menacing character in our culture sits next to the old lady and she's quite intimidated. That is compounded by the fact that some very noisy kind of teenagers are communicating across her.
The old lady sort of thinks he's a bit of a sinister sort of character.
But it turns out he is the one that eventually takes his hood off and says to the very noisy girls, you know, please keep your noise down. And in fact, reverses the stereotypical expectation of his character. The mobile phone guy is making so much noise and he upsets a couple of the teenage girls at the back.
His girlfriend happens to be on the bus and he's had a row with her that morning. And eventually they end up, he calls her to say sorry, and it just so happens that she's sitting upstairs.
Which was just a kind of cute way of connecting two of the cameras, you know, as I did in Time Code, so that you suddenly realize the person he's talking to is upstairs.
So this girl sends him a text and says basically keep the volume down.
The same guy who's making the noise on his phone suddenly realizes not only was he making a lot of noise, But he's sitting down, and standing next to him is a pregnant woman, so he gets up and gives her the seat that he was sitting in.
They sort of make up on the phone and realize that they're on the same bus, and he comes up and they finally make up.
So we've just done, I think, maybe 3 or 4 takes on the bus moving, and now we're going to put it all together and look at it, and actually we'll learn more by watching it than we can by talking about it.
So as soon as they get off the bus with the cameras, they throw tapes at me, I get them in the computer, as you can see here, clump the 4 things together, sync them with the clapper at the beginning, and with any luck they all run concurrently and in sync.
The actors, the camera operators, everybody had to be in the same room watching the same film, and it's almost like you have to do a sort of a running commentary, almost like a seminar, as from my point of view. As I go along, I have to kind of constantly stop the film and say, okay, you can see there, you're too early or you're too late.
And it was kind of like a Mike Figures masterclass, if you like, in acting, because he was able to go through the film very, very slowly, almost frame by frame, and talk to each individual actor.
I really liked it. There was a moment when both actors bring her in, and as she exits, this is good storytelling. It's close. The acting's really close, but we're just drifting off at certain key places.
The main, let's say, post-production work, obviously, we would balance the image quality and make it as aesthetically as appropriate as it was needed to be. But the main work and the most challenging work would be in the sound edit, because you have 4 stories being told, not just visually but also with people speaking. And from the very beginning I said we should do the sound post-production at Hackenbacker, because these are the guys that understand the way I work. I always knew that when I did Timecode, that the most important element would be the sound mix, and it is.
It's quite a modern way of doing it, and I think therefore it will be much more effective by not having this branding at the end. So when it comes out, it will be seen as a short film. It will run as a short film in the cinema. It's not a commercial.